Hey everyone, welcome to Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast. I am Heather Hoops Matthews, joined today by two Maynard Nexsen colleagues. First, here with me in the studio, Matthew Roberts, a partner with our healthcare and life sciences practice. Matthew, good to be with you.
Good to see you.
And in our Birmingham, Alabama office, Lauren DeMoss. She is also a partner or shareholder with our healthcare and life sciences practice group. Lauren, good to see you again.
Yes, thanks, Heather. Great to be here.
I love it when I have you both on because we can do these like lightning rounds and cover a lot of ground. And I'm a broken record. It always seems like it's a busy year in healthcare and life sciences, but it really does seem like 2025 has been crazy.
Yeah.
Especially in the regulatory landscape, still going. I want us to look ahead to 2026. And both of you recently had FaceTime with general counsels for hospitals and healthcare organizations, and you got insight into what some of them are thinking about. Share, if you would, Lauren, if you don't mind starting, share some of what you heard and what are and what you've learned are the issues keeping them up at night.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. And we were able to spend some time with some folks that are in-house. And I think I would start by saying there's probably very little that's not keeping them up at night. It seems like there are just so many things on their plates. They all seemed very overwhelmed with just the different issues being thrown at them daily from an operational perspective, from a regulatory perspective. I would say, one issue that I had sidebar conversations with folks about that's continuing to keep them up at night are probably cybersecurity threats, and just the multitude of threats, the frequency of cybersecurity threats, and still kind of reeling from Change Healthcare last year and what that did from an operations perspective, and just being prepared for something like that to occur. I think that's in the back of their minds. It's maybe not at the forefront of their minds, or at least hopefully not at the forefront of their minds daily as they deal with kind of other operational issues. And Matthew and I know there are plenty of those, but the devastating effect something like that could have, I think, is keeping them up at night. It keeps me up at night for them, so I know it's keeping them up at night.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Another factor I think is, the expansion of their physician relationships, mostly employment. So a lot of these health systems have, increasingly large physician networks where they employ physicians. And contrary to popular belief, that might be the riskiest thing that a hospital does is enter into a written agreement with a physician because of the Stark Law, anti-kickback laws, the Federal False Claims Act. So I think there's a lot of infrastructure built around ensuring compliance. But when you're employing hundreds of physicians and there are new contracts being renewed and new contracts being entered into on a weekly basis, it is a lot to keep track of. And so I do think that's something that in-house lawyers worry a lot about. And, we'll continue to see if there's additional enforcement in this area. There always has been. But I think that's something that they're concerned about and we'll put some attention to.
And I think, Matthew, that's a great point, too, as you think about, we certainly heard that, and especially in the case of academic medical centers as they expand their footprint or acquire, affiliate with, non-academic medical center community hospitals.
Right.
And they have a different model, in terms of physician engagement and employment and medical staff issues that maybe an academic medical center has dealt with, or it's different for them. And so that's something I think that plagues someone that's maybe been in-house at an academic medical center for a long time, and all of a sudden they're overseeing a community hospital, and those physician relationship / employment issues are something that's new and causing some issues.
And something that is exacerbating both those issues we just talked about is the continued growth and consolidation of these systems, which is good. But as operationally they get used to one level, they get bigger, and they've got to get used to a bigger level. And so that creates risks on cyber, that creates risks on physician employment, it creates risk on other compliance issues, reimbursement risk. So I think they have a lot on their plate.
Man, it sounds like they do. Yeah. Good thing they have good outside counsel.
Good thing.
Lauren was with me at the North Carolina Life Sciences Conference recently. And Lauren, I think almost everybody we interviewed talked about AI, right? It's with everything. It's having a big impact. So how is AI affecting outside counsel for healthcare entities? And what about for consumers or patients of healthcare?
Yeah, so I think we obviously are talking about this a lot, right? I think someone in our cyber group told me earlier this week that this past year alone, in different state kind of legislative agendas, there were over 1,000 bills introduced dealing with AI. Now, obviously, not all of those passed, but that's how many were introduced, and that's how many different aspects of AI states are trying to tackle, regulate, create some sort of framework around. And I think as you talk to healthcare companies, I like to call it kind of a Goldilocks approach, not too much adoption of AI, not too little adoption of AI, but what's kind of just right, meaning, you don't want to be, or maybe there, is some concern with being a quick adopter of all things AI, everything that's being thrown at you from a patient care perspective, from looking at data analytics, all the different AI tools that are available, and you want to just gobble them up and use all of them, versus you're terrified of it and you don't want to use any sort of AI. And so I think that the right approach is kind of this Goldilocks approach of just right, and what just right means is different for every healthcare entity and what makes sense. But I think one theme I would say around figuring out what's just right is governance. Some sort of governance around AI is super important, and that's what we're working with folks on in preparing policies around what AI adoption looks like, what will be permitted in your larger kind of institutions, having a committee that is available and tasked with reviewing AI products that clinicians, administrative staff, folks that bring to the table that they want to use in the hospital or at the provider, and you have some sort of centralized way to vet those. Because, and as Matthew and I know, we've talked about this, that when you have your data out there, and AI wants your data, right? They want you to use your tool, but they also want
AI needs your data.
Right. That's right. They need it, and they want to train it, because bias is a huge issue too, if it doesn't have enough data. And so it just, being able to gauge the exposure risk with using AI wanting your data, and what that looks like. We talked a lot with in-house counsel about, vendor agreements, negotiating vendor agreements, negotiating business associate agreements differently when you're talking about, AI wanting your data to train whatever product or tool it is. And putting stronger parameters on that to try to, decrease your risk of exposure. So, we could talk about AI all day, and I know we've had so many different, we've had a few different podcasts on AI. Maybe we need to do another one in early 2026. But from a patient perspective, there should be, if AI is being used in patient care, there are supposed to be pretty prominent notices regarding use of AI, depending on how it's being used in patient care. If it's, an example is if it's being used by the doctor to record notes in the medical record after a visit, if it's, recording the actual interaction you have with the physician, and they are using that after the fact to, write down in the medical record what occurred, and then if it's being used to bill, some sort of notice that puts, makes the patient aware that AI is being used is required in almost every situation. So being, looking for those notices, if you have some, trepidation about what AI is being used, asking questions. I think patients are evolving in terms of, knowledge of the industry and their rights, and asking questions if you see a notice that AI is being used.
That's helpful.
One interesting thing about AI is if you think about when WebMD came online and people began to use that to self-diagnose, I just wonder when you get more enhanced AI capacity online, how much people will start to rely on that. Will they overly rely on it? Will they self-diagnose themselves with whatever using AI? Because that's something that was a frustration to physicians and healthcare providers, but AI is not going to make that easier, I don't think.
Right.
No, Matthew, you see state laws, many states coming out with laws that still require physician oversight, even when, an institution, maybe not like a WebMD, but if an institution is using some sort of AI tool in treatment or diagnosis, they're still being, needing a physician oversight or physician sign off on it. So those state laws, need to be enhanced over time, to ensure, that the physicians are still having input, that folks aren't out there having total confidence in some sort of self-diagnosis based on AI.
And the lack of comprehensive federal regulation of AI, which we will not have in the near future, and have it led be by state regulation, is also make it very difficult for multi-state providers, because you could have different state to state regulations. So,
speaking of government,
yes.
Matthew, as of the recording of this podcast today, we are still in the middle of what's turning out to be longer than expected government shutdown.
Record-breaking shutdown.
Yeah. What is the impact of this on healthcare providers and patients?
Yeah, so there's a lot of unknowns, creating a lot of trepidation. One of the things that we don't know how bad the impact will be is a lot of things that were in play, reimbursement appeals, litigation matters, all have been put on hold. So how long does that impact? We won't really feel that. The government's done a pretty good job of not blocking access to services for the moment. They've trimmed some services, but you that can't go on forever if the government's shut down. I think the biggest impact is going to be if they cannot get an agreement on the exchange subsidies. And if those higher subsidies go into place, it will have a massive impact, because like it or not like it, the Affordable Care Act, politically, the Affordable Care Act has been well received and liked by the country. And there are millions of people on it. And if their premiums go up by 100%, 70%, and they can't afford it, we're going to have a problem that impacts particularly healthcare system, but all of the safety net systems will be super, super stressed to deal with people without insurance but have healthcare issues. So that's got to be addressed, whether it's politically popular on one side or the other. It's got to be addressed.
And Matthew implied this, but it's really just the shutdown is creating so much more uncertainty on top of already existing uncertainty, but both from the provider side, the payer side, and the patient side. So it's coming at it from kind of all three angles, and the uncertainty that they have with what it's going to look like, what that's going to look like for them, what it's going to look like for providers, and then patients, knowing whether they're going to have coverage. And you couple that with kind of strains that are already, financial strains that are already on the industry. I don't think it's not like when they resume and the shutdown's over that all that will be fixed. But hopefully there'll be movement towards policies so it creates some level of certainty going forward.
And forward, right around the corner, is 2026. What are the big, other than fixing what you both just explained, what are some other big policy issues to watch for in the healthcare and life sciences industry? Challenges.
Lauren, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I think 340B and the rebate program will be a big. There's been a focus on the second part of 2025 on pharmaceuticals, cost of drugs. The 340B program has had, its kind of fair share of turmoil over the last couple years, and manufacturers putting some pressure to look at it slightly differently. So I think the rebate program, the rollout of that piece of it, 340B comes to mind as kind of a big issue, maybe in early 2026.
I think you're going to see some potential bipartisan support for PBM regulation at the federal level, based on some things we've heard recently. Sounds like that Congress would like to get something passed bipartisan wise on health, and that will be one area. possibly prior authorization. That's something that's gotten more bipartisan support in recent months. And you could get a push for more deregulation in healthcare, which is interesting. The administration's been focused on deregulation, but it hasn't followed the normal path of repealing statutes. It's more executive orders, those kinds of things. So I think you could have more of that in certain areas, assuming we get over the shutdown and the impact of that. But I think it'll be active in healthcare in 2026.
So more change.
Definite more change.
Heather, I think too, we had some proposed HIPAA regulations come out at the beginning of 2025 that have been sitting there now for almost a year. And so potentially those could be finalized in 2026. Maybe they'll still be finalized later this year, but it'll certainly have an impact on some of the HIPAA policies and procedures and implementation of certain parts of the security rule. That was a big part of those proposed changes to the regulations. So I think that's a potential too in 2026 for those to come out. HIPAA hasn't been overhauled in a couple decades now. So that's
wow.
Maybe I should say it's part of my wish list because it kind of sits out there and you actually see agreements that have contemplated the changes already. So folks are a little, unsure of which way, if those are going to be made final or how that's going to look. So I think we could see that potentially in early 26 too.
Well, if you saw that in early 26, that would mean that the next few weeks went well. So I guess that would be bring on the HIPAA changes. That would be positive.
I would say another thing for 2026 that's not necessarily new, but we'll see the continuation of, Matthew, is the healthcare deal work, the M&A work, not just between providers, but I think also private equity involvement in the healthcare industry. Again, not anything new, but we'll continue into 2026. And as we think about that continuation, I know we've received some guidance or maybe some nuggets from the Justice Department regarding oversight of private equity and their involvement in the healthcare space. And that hasn't been heavily regulated, but I think it's getting more and more attention. And so as those deals continue, which we certainly anticipate, there could be some extra parameters placed around private equity.
Yeah, I completely agree. Based on what we're seeing in terms of deal flow, we anticipate the end of the year being very busy, but also next year be extremely busy with M&A activity, buy, sell. And based on the meeting that Laura and I were both in with some folks at DOJ, that they are definitely focused on private equity, which is not a surprise. It composes a much bigger percentage of healthcare operations than it ever has, and so it will get focused on by DOJ, and of course they're prepared to deal with that. But that will come in these acquisitions, and as Lauren alluded to, you're going to have some state regulation of private equity activity on acquisitions, and that's been more prevalent than federal activity. So that'll be in play next year as well.
Last question for you both, and Matthew, I hate, you and I have been here about the same amount of time, so you're aging us when I ask this, but yes. You've been a healthcare and life sciences attorney now for over 30 years. Lauren, you're approaching 20. What are the biggest kind of takeaways that you have from the last couple decades? Yeah,
for me, it's the healthcare industry is just dynamic and it never stays the same. And, every week seems to be an example of that. So you have to go into it prepared for that. It's not boring because it's never the same. So you don't have time to get bored. And so you have to prepare yourself to address new regulations, new statutes, and be open to that as a lawyer, because you're going to learn things that become irrelevant in a matter of years and then learn new things. So I think that, and the second thing that is you've got to remain focused on what the client's goals are. You've got this chaos of healthcare regulations, statutory policy, everything else. But what is it trying to do? And remaining focused on that and help guide them through this process of navigating these things are the two things that stand out to me that I've learned the most.
Yeah. Lauren, what about you?
Yeah. I think I've learned to be flexible in terms of, what my days look like and what is most important to the clients that day. There's so much that they're responsible for from a regulatory perspective, and then balancing that with operations, being flexible and looking to them on what their priorities are. And Matthew alluded to this too, but I've learned something new every day. So maybe I've learned that I don't know much at all is what you learn too changes. But I think that's what makes this area so, to me, so attractive and exciting, that there's always something new. It's dynamic. There's so many different parts to it, so many different players in the market. And that's why I love doing what I do.
Well, I can tell from watching you both is that your practice group area, you like it.
Yeah.
And you can see that passion, and you have to have it because really it feels like you are the Kentucky Derby race every day. Full sprint, running towards the finish line, never stops.
It's frenetic. And the other thing that this does is we have so many subspecialists within the team, so we're not generalists anymore. And so when you started, you could be sort of a generalist. Now we've got 17 people on our team, and they all have their own respective areas of expertise, and you have to do that now. It's when I started, you did not have to do that, and so it's becoming much more subspecialized, which allows our culture of collaboration to really work well, because we need to work well in order to satisfy the clients, their objectives and goals.
Right. Well, we need to do this more often, because every time we have an episode like this, it gets great engagement. People want to hear what you're thinking. And Lauren, Matthew, thank you both for sharing that today.
Thank you.
No questions to put you on the spot. Maybe next time. I do dream about that, Lauren, to just really put him on the spot one day. For those of you who joined us for this episode, we hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about behind the scenes, what these two experts think about the healthcare and life sciences industry. And we hope we see you next time right here on Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast.